It's been a wild week online for Bradley Cooper. He's starring in and directing a biopic about the conductor Leonard Bernstein. But new photos of him in character have shocked some commentators. Today, does Bradley Cooper's prosthetic nose go too far? I'm Amil Niazi, sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Okay, so Bradley Cooper's been working away on a passion project about Leonard Bernstein, and this week he finally got to share the trailer for Maestro with the world. He's directing the movie, but he also stars as the Jewish composer. But let's just say the reaction he got was maybe not the one that he was hoping for. Here with me to talk about this story and the week's other big arts and pop culture headlines are Niko Stratis, Richie, Assaly, and Chandler Levack. Welcome back to the show, you guys.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi.
Good morning.
Okay, so as I mentioned, we got a sneak peek of Bradley Cooper's highly anticipated, I think that's fair to say, movie about Leonard Bernstein, Maestro. Let's hear a little bit of that.
I'm thinking of a number.
Oh, I don't know. 9.
No.
5.
No, you have to think.
I'm trying to.
It's 2, darling.
2.
It's 2. Like us, a pair. 2 little ducks in a pond.
They're just 2 little ducks in a pond, Bradley Cooper and Carey Mulligan. That's from Maestro. Okay, I've seen the trailer, and you know what? I'll give it this. It looks beautiful. But apart from the cinematography, something did stand out to me, okay, right away. And that's Bradley Cooper's prosthetic nose. It's very large. And he's using it to portray Bernstein. And some people are saying it reinforces negative physical stereotypes about Jewish people. Richie, what was your reaction when you saw the nose?
Yeah, I first saw these photos appear on Twitter, and I'll admit that I was a bit shocked. Bradley Cooper is one of the most famous, most recognizable actors in Hollywood. And so to see him wearing this, conspicuously large nose in order to play a famous Jewish character, my mind immediately jumped to those well-known anti-Semitic caricatures, that have existed for centuries. Mm-hmm. And so I was a bit confused by this choice. Debates around representation in movies and TV are complicated, I think, and they depend on things like cultural context, who's telling the story, etc. And so I think there's an interesting discussion, a nuanced discussion to be had about whether or not it was appropriate for Cooper, who is not Jewish, to play a famous Jewish person. But at the same time, I feel like there is a consensus, at least today in 2023, that actors shouldn't be, altering their physical appearance to portray other racial or ethnic groups. We know that blackface is not appropriate or okay. We know that yellowface is not appropriate or okay. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's anything malicious going on. And I understand that Cooper probably just wanted to really closely resemble Bernstein. But it also just feels unnecessary, as many people, you probably saw people on Twitter comparing the 2 faces of Cooper and Bernstein and pointing out that Bradley Cooper's prosthetic nose is actually bigger than Bernstein's actual nose.
Quite a bit bigger, yeah.
Yeah, so to me, it's just a bizarre choice. And, as someone who's not Jewish, I'm not sure if I'm going to weigh in whether it's anti-Semitic or not, but it definitely feels like a bizarre misstep and something that's going to kind of hang over this movie as they roll it out.
Okay, Chandler, like Richie said, it is a nuanced and complicated conversation, and you're a filmmaker, but you are also of Jewish descent. Is there any justification for him wearing a prosthetic like this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like it's my place to speak for the entire
No.
Jewish population.
Nor must you.
I did go on Birthright, though. I mean, I really like Bradley Cooper. I'm very emotionally invested in him as an auteur. I love Star is Born. I feel like almost like it's his fatal flaw. He wants an Oscar so badly that he's willing to do whatever it takes, and he's going to lose it by a nose. And
Boo.
Thank you.
Oh,
I mean,
God.
I know that he had a very personal connection to Leonard Bernstein, and that's kind of why he really wanted to tell the story. And it's been his passion project for almost his entire career. Mm-hmm. I just think he maybe just went too method, and but it's interesting because when he played the Elephant Man on Broadway, he didn't have any insane prosthetics for that role. But you see those pictures and you're like, wow, this looks like an egregiously offensive portrayal of the Elephant Man. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I know that I feel like anti-Semitism is always in the cultural conversation. Sometimes it's more in the periphery, but of course, lately over the last, since the rise of Trump, really, there's so much negativity out there, and I think it's a population that deserves like very multifaceted stories that are told where we can tell our own stories, and we have seen that. And, this year, you have Cillian Murphy playing Oppenheimer. You have Helen Mirren playing Golda Meir, which is hilarious. And I don't know, but at the same point, it's like there should also be space for artists to take on things that they feel connected to. But I think it has to be in collaboration with the community that they're portraying at the same time.
Yeah, I like that. Niko, it's kind of bringing up, I think, this other conversation about marginalized communities and whether or not we get to play either ourselves or other roles in Hollywood, whether it's, colorism surrounding Black actors, BIPOC actors getting to play, the roles that they could inhabit, or trans actors getting to play trans roles. How do you think that this conversation fits into that larger conversation?
I mean, it's a nuanced and difficult conversation. I haven't weighed in on the Bradley Cooper thing just because it's not really my place to have an opinion on. I'm not Jewish and I don't have a connection to that. And this is a conversation I'm like watching and reading and thinking a lot about, obviously. But like the representation thing, it's interesting because it is like if a character in a movie or a show or whatever, if their cultural background, their ethnicity, their gender, their sexuality, if it's part of them, having that lived experience to me is important. Like for me as a trans person, when I see cis people play trans folks, which it happens less now because we've started talking about it more, but it happens. Like they don't have that understanding of where, a trans character is coming from. Normally, if the character is trans in a thing, their transness is part of their character because a lot of times people are also written very one-dimensionally. This goes back to that spirit of collaboration, right? Like sometimes these characters aren't written from a place of understanding, and this happens across the board in multiple mediums. So it's, it is a rich and nuanced conversation. And I think it's an important one that people are having out loud because it gives people, if they're outside of whatever, it gives us all an opportunity to sit and listen and not just always opine. Like I do hope that people are sort of like, with this one in particular, it's like, okay, well, this isn't for me to have an opinion on necessarily, but it is a place for me to listen to other people's opinions and factor those in and think about these things. And it is. It is an interesting conversation and there's no easy answer because everybody wants a community to be monolithic so they can go to one figurehead and say, can you give us the definitive answer as to whether this is anti-Semitic or whether this is racist or whether this is transphobic? And it's not that easy, right? It demands a larger conversation.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. It is a really interesting conversation. And, unlike what we tend to do on social media, you do kind of want to sit back and absorb everything rather than just shoot off a hot tweet, even though it's so tempting to shoot off hot tweets. Richie, we should note that Leonard Bernstein's children have come out and said, we support him. He's had their support since the beginning of the project. He even sent his co-star to Bernstein's grave to commune with his ghost. And apparently he's got the all clear. So should that be enough for people to be quiet?
I mean, I think it points to the fact that this is a nuanced and, that a nuanced conversation and there's various sides and angles to this. But I mean, this is a massive film, right? This is produced or co-produced by Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese's involved, all these A-list actors. And so I'm not surprised that the family is being supportive of it. I mean, I'm sure that this movie will kind of honor the legacy of Leonard Bernstein and even expand on it. So I think that obviously the family is going to be supportive, but I don't think that should stop us or stop people from having this discussion and interrogating the harm that this kind of portrayal may or may not have on the Jewish community. I don't think that people are out there saying, we need to cancel this movie. We need to shut it down. I think people just want to have this conversation at a time, especially as Chandler mentioned, with anti-Semitism is on the rise in the US and Canada. I don't think this should stop us from having this conversation. And like she also mentioned, Cillian Murphy playing Oppenheimer, there was a bit of pushback to that, but this movie was obviously a huge success, and I think it's generated a lot of interesting conversations about that type of representation. So in my opinion, this is especially the way we're having this conversation feels healthy and productive, and I'm sure this movie will be seeing all these guys at the Oscars in a few months.
Yeah, let's see. Hopefully, like Chandler said, it doesn't put a damper on Bradley's aspirations. Chandler, I want the last word to you because I'm curious to get your perspective as a filmmaker. How much, when you're casting roles yourself, do you factor in this kind of, these questions of ethnicity and authenticity? Does it affect the casting process for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I think that's something that's really paramount, I think, for all filmmakers right now is, I'm kind of two minds of it, because I think it's really important that diverse actors get opportunities to play parts where their race or gender or sexuality isn't the defining thing about their character. I really want to make space for films where you have BIPOC or queer or trans actors just playing people that exist, and it isn't rooted in trauma or their own identity being the sole focus of that story. And I think all filmmakers, we owe ourselves the opportunity to really make, when we're casting, just open up all roles in terms of is there a really incredible actor who could do this? That's not, top of mind. But at the same point, I think if you are doing that, then, sometimes it can get tricky, because then how much of that background becomes part of the fabric of the screenplay? Maybe you don't need it, maybe you do. And but I do think it just makes things so much more interesting when there's a huge diversity of people playing roles. In my film, Isaiah Lettinen was playing a Jewish character, but he's Indigenous as an actor. And it's not anything that maybe I'm going to get canceled now by the entire Jewish community. But I don't know. I felt like it felt authentic to me and to him, and we wove it into the story. And, it's a bit ambiguous how Jewish that character is supposed to be, but I really wanted, he's I couldn't imagine anybody else playing that part. And
he was brilliant.
Collaborate. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess it's a bit complicated, but I just want the best actor to play the part always.
I like that. And it is complicated. And now we're going to move to another kind of complicated story, but a little bit different. Although I have to admit, I thought it was also a joke when I first saw it. Okay, so we're switching gears. We're talking about a song that started as just a little old YouTube upload and then suddenly became the top song on Spotify and Apple Music.
I've been selling my soul, working all day, overtime hours for bullshit pay, so I can sit out here and waste my life away, drag back home and drown my troubles away. It's a damn shame.
From the town of Farmville, Virginia, that's Oliver Anthony with his song Richmond, North of Richmond. It doesn't really flow off the tongue, I have to admit. Okay, Niko, 10 days ago, nobody outside of Virginia knew about Oliver Anthony. Now he's the most talked about artist in country music. Who's this guy?
I mean, we know very little. It is this very concerted effort that we know very little. I feel like, he's sort of released information about himself in fits and starts. The story initially was he lives off grid on a pig farm, and he has sort of expanded on his own narrative a little bit and said, he used to work in a factory in Virginia and he had an accident, and now, he lives in a trailer, and he's sort of he seems very, he's rural, he lives rural, he's working class, he's all of these things that are most likely true. I don't think none of this stuff is necessarily fabricated. But he is this person that's just sort of appeared out of nowhere. Oliver Anthony, not his real name. That's his grandfather's name. It's what he records under to honor his father and sort of honor the spirit of Appalachia that he says his grandfather comes from. And it's, he's very much like this blank slate that we're sort of, a lot of people are transposing a lot of ideas onto, because it is very easy to transpose a lot of ideas onto a guy that looks like literally almost every other white guy with a beard, he's it's easy to take a lot of things out of him. And to sort of, now we are seeing his face everywhere, partially because the left is turning him into a meme nonstop, and the right is pushing him as the second coming of the voice of a generation.
Yeah, he's the right-wing Arlo Guthrie, and he's all we have left. Richie, this song comes on the heels of Jason Aldean's Try That in a Small Town. We've talked about that controversy on this show. Do you think that the timing of that has sort of contributed to this song's success?
Yeah, I definitely see them as related and the timing mattering. As we've mentioned probably on other episodes, like Try That in a Small Town which is this sort of grating song that is ostensibly an ode to small towns, but it's actually kind of chocked full of these reactionary, racist dog whistles. It wasn't actually a hit when it came out back in May, right? It only became a major hit when Aldean released a video, which was filled with this sort of violent, kind of like pseudo-fascist imagery, and it took place in front of this courthouse that was actually the site of an infamous lynching in the 1920s. Caused a lot of controversy, got taken off TV and everything like that. And it was only at this point that this song really exploded once this discourse started getting underway, and the right sort of turned Aldean into this sort of martyr for the culture war, and Republicans really rallied around this song, and it eventually shot up the charts. So I think there's a lot of discussion about how this Oliver Anthony song is this sort of organic success story, just this kind of guy and a guitar. But I think he's really benefiting from a conservative base in America that's really primed to rally around another country song that fits the Republican narrative, and to kind of wring as much kind of viral capital out of it as they can. This wasn't a perfectly organic story. There was like what felt like a coordinated effort by far-right politicians like Marjorie Taylor Greene and kind of alt-right guys like Matt Walsh. They all kind of boosted this song at once. So in my opinion, it feels like the conservatives are sort of latching onto or weaponizing country music, as they have in the past, as this sort of new frontier in the culture war that I think is working for them. And I think that really does go a long way to explain its success.
Chandler, I think it's easy to sometimes laugh off stuff like this, but, on YouTube, it's got 80,000 positive comments. So what is it in this song that people are rallying behind and really responding to?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it goes back to the way that like Trump's campaign first kind of was successful in the mid 2010s, like this kind of idea of giving dissent or speaking a voice to this kind of like frustrated working class American voter that just wants to feed his family and works a living wage. Like it has that sentimentality to it. And there's a real earnestness about it. I mean, that guy looks like, at first I thought he was like a new Mumford and Son or like a member of Iron and Wine.
Yeah, he looks like Iron and Wine.
But, there's just something about like the folded up camping chair and like his two dogs at his feet in this kind of like stripped or acoustic performance that I think people are giving him so much more authenticity than he deserves. But, it does strike a nerve. I think that there's this kind of rallying cry, and it's not like the issues that he's pointing out aren't what we're all facing with like the rising cost of inflation and the insane, way that governments treated people after the pandemic. But I think that often country just feels so overproduced that maybe there's an authenticity to him that people connect with.
Okay, let me play a little bit of this song that's attracted even more controversy than what we've been talking about. Take a listen to this.
Lord, we got folks in the street, ain't got nothing to eat, and the whole beast milking welfare. Well, God, if you're 5'3" and you're 300 pounds, taxes ought not to pay.
Even me, us versus them, the working little guys, like I get that. But then there's this third character that he introduces that somehow is different from him as a working person, and that's where you lose me. Niko, he said his views are pretty dead center down the aisle when it comes to politics. What do you think the song actually reflects?
Dead center is a nice thing you say when you want to appear moderate because you don't want to be seen as having a political affiliation. It is an easy way to gain this sort of virility where you just sort of like you take this passive approach to your own personal politics, even though you can hear it like all those things in that section that we just heard. Those are like very like deliberate little dog whistles. We know what all those things are about. We know that's about Epstein's Island. We know, and like the thing about like there's people on the street that they can't eat, but then like the people milking welfare, like, so some people are allowed to be poor and some people aren't allowed to be poor. Like,
and some people are eating too much, apparently.
Yeah, there's this idea of the thing about him that I can really see very plainly is this thing that a lot of people really like, which is the saleability of the piousness and the virtue of the working man that isn't really real, but you can sell it really nicely, right? You can put a lawn chair and a couple of dogs at somebody's feet. He can sing like he's trying to impress everybody at an open mic, and all of a sudden it feels real, it feels authentic, and whether it is or not doesn't really matter. He can claim his politics are down the center, even though I guarantee you down the center makes you think like, oh, you could go either way. I don't think he's dipping his toe into the left all that often. There's nothing in what he has said or what he has written that leads me to believe that he might lean a little bit leftist. It's all pretty right wing, and that's fine. But you sort of want to portray yourself as a moderate, because then you can go back if people are reacting to it and saying, whoa, well, look, the thing that a lot of people have been saying is like, well, you look at the people that are commenting on his videos and you see black people, you see brown people, you see the gays are commenting on his video. And it's like, yes, but you're trying to turn all those people into monoliths too, where you're saying, well, look, the representative from the gays came out and they said he's okay, so therefore he must be a moderate. And it's like, no, there's right-wing gay people and they probably like this too. It's not a song that is appealing to the left wing. So it's a very interesting conversation to watch unfold, partially because I think it is this flattening of working class conversations that happens on both sides, right? The thing that is the most down the middle is, I think, on the left and the right, I think there's a misunderstanding of working class politics to a certain degree. And it's a complicated one for me, for sure.
Okay, it is an interesting conversation. It's one we're going to keep watching. But before we go, I really, really, really want to play a little bit of a very different viral song. If we can just talk about this, here is another song that people are paying attention to. Okay, Richie, we have 30 seconds, but I just want you to please quickly tell us, why is this joke, this meme, suddenly the song of the summer?
Yeah, well, so as you didn't have a chance to mention, but this is a brilliant parody by a guy named DJ Crazy Times. He's a comedian from New York. It's a parody of a 90s Eurodance song. Think Eiffel 65, think Aqua. It's just this ridiculous parody that's got these big clubby synths, these kind of vaguely sexy outer space themes, and these ridiculous lyrics in broken English. It's obviously goofy, but people have really latched onto it just because it's just so, the appeal is so broad. It's such a it just kind of nails the parody in such a perfect way. My favorite line is, when the rhythm is glad, there is nothing to be sad. To me, that just sort of sums up where we're at with pop music right now in this sort of post-pandemic moment where we don't want to be thinking about anything too serious in the news. We just want the rhythm to be glad and to not be sad. So I think people are just really kind of latching onto that right now.
I love it. And I want us to leave not sad, but glad. So thank you all three for having this conversation and unpacking this week's news. Okay, before we go, help me understand what I should be paying attention to this week. Richie, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. I'd like to recommend an EP that came out last week by a violinist and composer named Rob Moose. You probably haven't heard of Rob Moose, but he's appeared on hundreds of recordings over the last 15, 20 years, playing strings or providing arrangements for artists like The National, Sufjan Stevens, Phoebe Bridgers, Taylor Swift, Moses Sumney. Pretty much any influential indie artist of the last decade he's worked with and helped kind of shape their music. His debut EP, Inflorescent, just came out last week. It features Justin Vernon, Phoebe Bridgers, Brittany Howard, some other people. Really interesting, unique album that just has vocals and strings, nothing else. Definitely worth checking that out.
I love it. Chandler, what about you?
I just went to a TIFF members preview of Emma Seligman's Bottoms last night, and the follow-up to Shiva Baby, and I absolutely loved it. Emma's a young she's originally from Toronto. She's a queer filmmaker, and it stars Io Debris from The Bear and Rachel Sennett, and it's really, really funny. It's kind of like this. It's about these queer high school students that are super horny that start a fight club so they can make out with cheerleaders. It's kind of like the queer uproarious version of Not Another Teen Movie or Bring It On. It really harkens back to that. It's beautifully filmed. It's hilarious. It's really absolutely crazy and violent and bloody and super gay. And it's delight.
The trailer is so good. I really can't wait to watch that movie. Okay, Niko, last word to you.
You can watch The Bear season 2 on Disney Plus, and that is what I have been doing, and that is what I will continue to do because I love a show that has some of the best music use in modern TV right now, and also I love a show that really handles addiction and sort of like rebuilding yourself, and especially in the workplace, and anger and all of these sort of things swirling together into telling a very sweet and funny human story. It's perfect. I love it. So, watch that.
Okay, watch that. Lots to listen to, lots to watch. Thank you all for sharing those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for our Friday group chat. My guests were writer Niko Stratis, Toronto Star digital editor Richie Assaly, and film critic and filmmaker Chandler Levack. That's a bit of Heart of the People by Leela Gilday. She's a Juno Award-winning artist who was born and raised in Yellowknife. And like tens of thousands of others, she's had to flee the city she calls home because of wildfires. Now, luckily, she posted to Instagram that she's now safe in Alberta, but we are thinking of her and everyone who's been affected by the fires there and in British Columbia. For the latest on these stories, go to CBC News. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Amil Niazi sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. Commotion is back on Monday.